We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
So Kari, thank you for being here. It's so good to see you again. It's been a
Thank
little
you,
while.
Lisa. It has. Nice to see you.
So we're gonna, I'll kind of tell everybody a little bit about you, because I think it's actually fascinating. So you're an executive style coach, and what you kind of specialize in is the gray area. And the area that we were going to kind of touch on today is the gray area drinking.
Yes.
Which I find fascinating and had never heard that before, but it makes complete sense after we talked. And then some of the other things you mentioned you wanted to kind of talk about, and I do love this idea, is identity, labeling, and bullying.
Yes. Yes.
So welcome.
All the things. All the things that go along with drinking and being in society today, with alcohol being so prevalent in our life, and how we've been taught that, everyone drinks and it's normal and it's part of our culture. And it really has become all those things. And
It has.
yeah, and it can be problematic for some people. So that's really why I love talking about gray area drinking. I'm not on a crusade against alcohol. I am on a crusade, however, to bring the truth and the light behind what gray area drinking is and other gray areas, so that those that are hearing my message will raise their hand if they know that they are getting too far down the path with their drinking, and it's no longer shades of gray. You are now into the severely abusing category where it's no longer a choice. And that is my main purpose for speaking about this topic, because I want to make sure that others don't get in that trap, because alcohol works and it works great. And then it no longer works, and then it becomes a crutch for us, and then it becomes a habit, and then an addiction, and then it becomes a necessity. So I don't want to see people get to that place. I still want it to be a choice. And that is why I talk so much about it.
I love that, because honestly, until you and I spoke, I had never heard of that. But it's interesting because when I heard the term, I knew exactly what that meant. So why don't you explain that? Because the audience may not understand what that is. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. So the gray area of drinking is the space between someone who might be lightly socially drinking. I'm talking about the take it or leave it type drinkers, to those that are severely abusing alcohol, where it becomes a necessity for them to have alcohol every day. And that space that's in between that, it's a huge spectrum. It's a huge wide spectrum of drinkers. It's estimated, Lisa, that about 50% of the population that consumes alcohol may be in this gray area. So it's a lot of people.
Yeah. And I see that, because there's the social people. I get it. There's the social people, and then there's the ones that are already in their addiction, full on in their addiction. And it can be the in-between area. And so is it a mindset? Is it the way we are thinking about the alcohol or reacting with the alcohol that makes it cross that line?
Yes. Well, here's what I would tell everybody. The first signs of gray area, anything, especially with drinking, is the moment that you start questioning yourself. When you start having those internal questions, am I drinking too much? Why can't I stop at 2? Why can't I drink like other people? Why am I always thinking about my drinking? And these are all internal questions that we're not necessarily conscious of. They're sitting back there poking the bear, if you will. And it's those internal questions that I really want people to tune into. I heard those questions for a couple of years. I ignored them. And I was like, I'm fine. I'm like everyone else. It's like, I'm not drinking that much. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not, I don't want to be called a label. I'm certainly not going there. But then secretly, towards the end of my drinking time, I am absolutely Googling, am I an alcoholic? How do I know if I'm an alcoholic? How much is too much? I started actually Googling those things because I wanted to know the answers. And so when you get to that point, you know that you have crossed over into a line, but there does come a time too, when you are just, socially drinking, that there's those moments where you're like, man, I should have had so much last night. I overdid it. Then you get the guilt and the shame, and that cycle starts to happen, and it's happening more than once. Or you're playing that game with yourself, like, I'm not going to drink anymore during the week. I'm only going to have a drink on the weekend, and I'm only going to have one. And of course that turns into 2, 3 or whatever. And then your weekend only turns into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or then it becomes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? So we have all these beautiful games that we play with ourselves, and we try to outplay us, but we can't. And so when that voice gets louder and louder over a period of time, then you know that you most likely are in that dangerous zone that you need to be paying attention to.
It's interesting because how long ago was this? More than 20 years ago. I was kind of playing that game a little bit. And it's so funny you say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's exactly what happened. It was Thursday, started out with Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the next thing I know, there was one day a week, and I wasn't getting drunk though. I was drinking a couple beers. I wasn't getting drunk. I was getting a good little buzz, and it bugged me. And I felt an internal voice in me for a good year to stop. And it was for me, it became louder and louder, and it became an absolute warning. And so I did. And so one day I decided, okay, I'm going to quit drinking, because there's some reason why this is really pressing me. And I really believed it was God, because right after I quit drinking is when chaos hit my life. There was a lot going on in my personal life that I realized when I was in the middle of it, that, oh my God, had I been drinking, I would have absolutely crossed that line. I knew for a fact I would have crossed that line, because I just saw, excuse me, the progression of where I was going and the stress that I was under. And I had some measure of healing from my childhood, but not enough, not where I am today. And it was interesting because I heard that voice in my head, stop. And it scared me. Excuse me. It scared me. And so I did. I quit. And, I didn't drink for over 10 years. And now I drink, and it's a completely different thing. It's not like that. I can socially drink, I cannot drink, but I, like you said, I knew in my head, I was asking myself some of those questions of, why do I have to drink Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Why am I doing this every single night? But, hey, I'm not getting drunk, so it's not a big deal, but it is.
Yes. Well, it's a big deal if it's a big deal. And, and that's the thing, when it becomes if you think it's a problem, then it's a problem.
Right.
If those thoughts are there, then it becomes a problem. And that's probably the easiest way for one to know. There was a research paper. How the term originated, by the way, is a 2011 research paper done, an abstract paper by 2 physicians that were studying the alcoholism in the bigger scheme, and was like, wait a minute, there's another group here, a category that we're not speaking into, because it isn't so black and white. It's not a binary problem. This is alcohol with anything that we do. There are many shades of gray that are in between it. And society has really done a horrible job of teaching us that you're either an alcoholic or you're not. You either drink too much or you don't. And that's just crazy. That's why I'm saying, no, that is not true. Right. And so this research paper came out in 2011, and the term sort of was hiding. And then in 2016, I believe is when Jolene Park did a TEDx talk and brought gray area drinking to light. And then from there, a couple of people, maybe we're talking about it. There was only one other person that I knew at that time that was talking about it. And when I heard the term in 2018, it was on a podcast interview. I heard a girl share her story. She's the one who said, I was a gray area drinker. And by this point, I'm 2 years alcohol free. Okay. And I'm walking my dog in my neighborhood, and I heard her talk about gray area drinking. And I literally stopped in the middle of the street and went, oh my goodness, that is what I was. And I knew I was never an alcoholic. I really had a problem with that identity.
Mhm.
And I did go to AA for several months when I quit drinking in 16. I loved the program. I think AA has a place. I think every human on the planet should go through a 12-step program just because it makes you a better human, period. Right? You can take the
Mhm.
12-step program and massage it to whatever you want, but the actual program itself is an amazing program. But it wasn't a good fit for me. AA is for somebody who is severely abusing. It's more for people that need recovery. And I
Mhm.
was not in that realm. I needed discovery. I was trying to
Ooh.
discover why I was in that place. Right. So
Ooh,
it is,
that's good. Discovery instead of
yes,
recovery. That is
that's,
good.
yes. So I was really feeling that for me. And I wanted to it just share with others like what that meant. So as soon as I heard that term, gray area drinking, it was like a light bulb went off.
Mhm.
And I knew in that moment, oh my gosh, I think this is my calling. I felt like God called me into this work at that time. I was working a 6-figure job, loving life. I worked at Porsche and I drove a Porsche and, all the things. I thought I would never leave there. But all of a sudden now I had this massive calling on my life. And I thought, I got to be the person that's out there telling everybody
Mhm.
about gray area drinking, because if I do, I can get to raise their hand quicker, like I said. And then as all things happen in life, my business sort of evolved into other things of gray area marriages and careers and everything. But I will tell you that my passion, my life, my calling is truly on gray area drinking, because that was my origination story, right? That's where it all
Mhm.
began. And I feel so passionate about it. And it's what I'm really good at. It's what I'm
Mhm.
really good at, is helping people figure out how to have a relationship with alcohol that works for them. Obviously, I'm an advocate for them to not drink, especially if they are problematic drinkers, because even gray area drinkers, necessarily cannot go back to finding a balance for themselves if they are in that darker shade or medium shade, if you will, of gray. If they're, if they never really had much of a problem, they can find a balance. There has been some people that have gone back and found a balance that works for them. And my goal is to show them what life is like without it, show them
Mhm.
how to live without alcohol, getting to the root core, understanding their brain, understanding that identity has a huge piece of this. And I'm not talking about just claiming being an alcoholic or a problematic drinker. I'm talking much deeper than that when I talk about identity. And if they are in a place where they have become healthy with that decision, and at that point they want to test the waters, then I say, okay, try it and see. And I know for most people, they're going to be successful the first time or two that they go back to drinking. However, that doesn't always last. Matter of fact, it's quite often that we see what happens is they go back to drinking because they think they can get it under control. Then the same patterns, the same neural pathways that created this addictive habit in the first place gets woken back up inside their brain, and they're that pattern is again, and now they're back to the same old, same old, the same belief system that caused them to pick up the drink in the first place as back there in full force, because alcohol is absolutely baffling in that way. And that's an
Mhm.
AA saying. AA says alcohol is cunning and it's baffling. And I will tell you, for people that have a problem with drinking, including gray area drinkers, that is absolutely true.
So what does that mean? Because I'm not following quite what that means.
Yeah. So baffling and cunning, when we talk about alcohol, it has characteristics behind it that can absolutely fool us into believing that we need it. It's our friend. It's what soothes us. It's what
Mm.
comforts us. Right. And it's a false lie. It's
Mhm.
exactly what it is. It helps. Alcohol works. As a matter of fact, I wrote a post not too long ago. It said alcohol works. Of course, I captured a lot of people's attention there.
Yes.
That coming from me, because they know what I do. So I wrote, it absolutely works. It absolutely helps you fall asleep. Doesn't help you stay asleep, but
That's
it helps
true.
you fall asleep. It helps you forget your day. It helps ease your stress. It
Mhm.
helps take away. It helps you become more confident when you don't have the confidence to do something you don't want to do, right? It takes the fear factor away. It helps with all these things. It helps for 20 minutes. After
Mm.
20 minutes, once the alcohol effects are there, it only becomes more agitated for you inside. And anybody who's ever drank on a regular basis knows the first 20 minutes are glorious. After that, you just need to keep up with that same amount. And over time, you need more and more and more.
Mhm.
I was so prideful that I could drink an entire bottle of wine in one evening and not be hungover. I thought that that was a good thing. I wore the badge of honor that I could drink a whole bottle of wine in one sitting and not really feel the effects. I thought that was a good thing. I was building up my tolerance. No, it's called alcohol becomes to the point where you need it. You need more of it over a
Mhm.
period of time to gain the same effects.
Mhm.
So the first 20 minutes is all that really counts when you're drinking. After that, you're just drinking to keep up that same feeling that you think you got, but it's never
Mhm.
quite the same
That's true.
after the 20 minutes. So, and then what happens is for some people, Lisa, is that over a period of time, they need to have so much more of that and it causes more problems. So what they're thinking is going to erase the anxiety, for example. Now the alcohol is the cause of the anxiety.
Yes.
So it becomes the cause and the effect after a period of time. And this is really problematic for a lot of people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I was just sitting here thinking, I think back to my father, my parents. My mom didn't really drink. They would drink when they would, get together with their friends, go dancing or whatever. But I can remember my dad only had one day off a week.
Mm.
And if I remember right, he even did it in the evening. He would just have a couple beers.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't get drunk, just like I did. And it's like that. It was a learned behavior for me. It was definitely a learned behavior. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And our kids are absolutely watching and learning from what we're doing. And they're seeing the behavior like, oh, mom is upset. Mom had a bad day. And I'm going to just drink to ease, my, sorry, I'm laughing. For those that can't see, my dog is in the background.
I saw he's getting himself nice and comfy. He's checking out that pillow.
He is being completely naughty and I'm trying to just continue on without even noticing that he's there, but it's very
he's
hard
photobombing.
He really is. My goodness. Anyway. Oh, and I forgot where I was.
But... Oh, let's see. You were in the place of, I got distracted too.
That's okay. We'll continue on. It'll come back to us.
Well,
Thank you
okay.
for that, Frank.
That's funny. So, let's go back to the identity and labeling.
Yes.
And bullying, because those are, oh, I know. I was talking about my dad and I, watched him drinking. You were saying that children watch the behavior.
Yes. Yes. This is important. And thank you for bringing that back circle, because this is an important piece I do want to bring up. So, when we were kids, I don't know about you, but my parents drank in front of me and it, it was part of the culture. So I thought, well, that's what we just do. Everybody drinks, right. This is how we get through things. And my parents divorced when I was younger but it was still very much a part of their adult life. And so I just thought, well, that's just what you do. And it became an association. But there are some people, where not only is it just what you do to have fun, it becomes, this is what mom and dad do when they get home from work because they're so stressed out. Right. This is, and then they can associate, oh, mom and dad are now arguing about money and alcohol's involved. So now alcohol is bad. Money is bad because now they're arguing. And so it becomes a meaning that we attach to it as children. As we're growing up, we assign meanings to situations and experiences and circumstances. And as we experience that over and over again, our brain says, see, it happened last time. It must be true. And the more this happens, that we get our myelin sheets that are inside of our brain and our neural pathways become thicker and thicker. It's like evidence. And your brain says, well, it must be true. And there it is again. So it absolutely is true. That becomes a belief. That belief system is then what drives our behavior, because our beliefs are causing us to think a certain way. Those thoughts are then creating us to feel a certain way. And those feelings is what drives all action. Yeah. So this is like I call this the circular thinking loop, because this is what happens over in our side of our brain, is that we have the belief, the thought, the feelings, the actions, the results, which then reinforce that original belief. And here we go. We're back
It's
to
that
square one.
cycle. And I remember those cycles. And I remember thinking, I'm sitting here watching this cycle. How the hell do I stop it?
Mhm.
How do I stop it?
Yeah. Yep. So there are a couple ways to, if you're asking me, I can give some
Oh, you
tips.
give, I have worked
Yeah.
through it, but yes, I absolutely want you to share. Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
So the biggest piece to start with is having awareness, really knowing like, what am I doing? And not just willy-nilly it, like really diving deep, like there it is again. Sometimes it's just picking out a small piece of languaging that you say over and over inside your head. Like, I'm not enough, I'm never ahead. I'm always behind. I can't be liked. Whatever the record player's been spinning inside your head for all those years. If you get really good and quiet and start to see those patterns of the languaging that you're telling yourself over and over again, having the awareness is really key. And so I have a tool that I use called the SABER method, SABER. SABER stands for stop, acknowledge, breathe, embrace, and redirect. Stop when we have two incongruent thoughts inside of our head, which is cognitive dissonance. They're fighting against each other. You shouldn't do it. You should do it. For example, the angel, the devil. It also could be like, I feel a certain way about something, but another part of you, maybe your value system is butting up against it. It's anytime you have two or more incongruent thoughts that are fighting inside of your head. Whenever that happens, whenever you're just like, oh, the noise, it won't shut up, is to say stop out loud. And when you said stop earlier, when you got to a point with your drinking years ago, and you're like, I just was like, stop, I have to stop. Mm-hmm. If you say that out loud right now, do it with me. Mm-hmm. Say, stop. Boom. There's something inside your brain that happens. It cuts off the thinking to your reticular activating system, the prefrontal cortex of your brain. It just stops everything for you to be able to have space for you to back up, look at the broader picture, for you to have awareness and acknowledge what it is that you're actually thinking about. So we want to acknowledge those thoughts that are creating us to feel that way. Once we hit stop, we see the thinking by acknowledging it, then we can start to put some rational around it. So then we breathe. We need to breathe. We need to breathe to get our body into a nice, calm state. Yes. We want to move out of that fight, flight, or freeze. Breath is the fastest way to do that. And when we get to embrace, which is the E in SABER, this is when we want to look at our thoughts and know that we're human. We have to give ourselves empathy and grace in that moment and say, there's the familiar thought pattern. When I had those thoughts and I acknowledged, you also want to be thinking and asking yourself, is what I'm thinking right now true? Is it really true? Or could there be something else that is true? And I guarantee that there's always something else that is true. It's a story that we make up in our mind. Our brain does not like open loops. We try to find a way to close that gap. Yeah. Therefore, we create stories, and 99.9% of the time, those stories are wrong. So we have to know this about our brain and how we think. And embracing with grace, and then redirect is the last step of SABER. You want to be able to redirect by moving into gratitude, know that you are human, and then make a better decision by choosing something that's going to work for you. So that's the SABER method. That's one of the ways that I get out of that cycle when I find myself in it. And that's just one of many, but that's a quick way. And if the listener, if you are like, what did she just say? If you just remember the S, the A, and the B, stop, acknowledge, and breathe. If you just do those three things, stop to pause and reflect before you act, basically is what it is. That makes all the difference in the world. And you can start to make some change.
Absolutely. And that's interesting, because that's the same thing I do when I get triggered. Because for years, of course, I would get triggered and I would just react. I had no idea I was being triggered, and I would just react, and then I'd have to go clean up my mess. And so now, and you said the key word, and I say it all the time in my podcast, self-awareness. You have to have self-awareness. And that is what is empowering, actually, having that self-awareness and catching that. And when I catch, like you say, I loved how you described the thoughts, because that is so true. When they're fighting against each other, that is a perfect example of what goes on in my head. And when I'm triggered, there's all kinds of self-sabotaging thoughts that go in my head, right? And things don't make sense. They don't make sense. It's illogical. And so I have gotten to the point in my life where I recognize when I'm being triggered right away. I take a breath, I stop, I take a breath, I process, and it gives that space between when I recognize I'm triggered and the point of reacting. I have that space to take a deep breath, and that is exactly what I do. And then I think, okay, because I think about where my brain wants me to go, which is always something self-sabotaging. And I think, no, I don't have to make that choice. And I consciously find a different response.
So
and it
good.
works. Yeah, it works every time.
We just need to pause. I think we're so quick to react, and reaction, whenever we react, we tend to do it with judgment, whether it's on ourselves or someone else.
True.
So if we can learn to respond instead of react, we do so with curiosity, because responding is always going to provoke the questions.
Right.
Like, how can I look at this differently? What's the blessing or the gift here? Could there be something else that is true? The stories that we share about ourselves inside of our head, they are never great, right? We have an inner critic. We have an inner bully, which is a little bit different than an inner critic. An inner critic is all of the, like, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough.
You should have done this. You should have done that.
The constant, where your inner bully is like, like saying bad words about yourself, like dummy, or, things like that, like, snide kind of remarks. So we got this inner bully, we got the inner critic, we have all this experience that we've thought was true because this has been our experience, and we assign meaning to it. And so we go through life trying to balance all of this, and we're not even sure what's real, what's not. And so we just accept for what is. And so the key to all this is to really ask yourself and challenge yourself by responding and getting curious with your thoughts and saying, is this really true? Like, this keeps happening. And here's the punchline. If the thought is causing you to not feel good, if you are feeling bad about yourself, if you are feeling sad or disgusted or angry or frustrated or whatever, feeling that doesn't feel good, wait for it. The thought is not true. The thought is not true if it is causing you to feel any form of suffering inside of yourself. There's something else that could be true. So I invite you to write down those thoughts. Yeah. And then look at them and say, they're not true, because they're not true. How are you not enough? How are you measuring short? Right? You have to ask yourself, like, how are you not enough? You absolutely are enough. You're a child of the universe. You are more than enough. Done. But we have to challenge ourselves by asking those questions, and we don't always do that.
Yeah. And I love it. And that is a motto that I have included in my life, is replacing judgment with curiosity.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Somebody said that to me, and it just hit me really hard, because I that is because of my upbringing and what had happened to me. I did go into that judgmental, and for me, it was being protective. Right. And, you lose that childlike curiosity, and it's a great thing. My one daughter-in-law, she's always asking questions, and, I think I got her to the point where she doesn't apologize for asking the questions. And I had a great conversation with her last night, and, she says, I've got another question, I'm like, you are welcome to ask as many questions as you want. I love that she's curious.
Love it too.
And that's a wonderful thing. And we do need to be curious with ourselves. And I heard my bully. I called her out. I discovered her probably about a year ago, and she was pretty sneaky back there. And, it was just kind of in the background. And one day she showed her colors, and I called her out, and she's not there anymore.
Well, I think it's interesting because I don't know if we ever really get rid of that inner bully. I think, like you said, calling it out, I think it's helpful to name your inner bully, and they're always going to be with us because they have protected us for so long.
That's true. They went out of balance.
They went out of balance, and they're there. So we want to acknowledge that the inner bully has been there, or the inner critic has been there to protect us, because it absolutely has in those times of trauma. We move into a protective state when we go through trauma, and thankfully that version of ourselves likes to protect ourselves when we get into another similar situation. But it can also cause us those thoughts of like, see, you're stupid. It happened again. So we have to know when those thoughts come that it is our inner critic or bully, and we have got to take control of that. We can say to that inner critic, you know what? Thank you for wanting to drive the car today, but I will not allow you to drive. You can get yourself in the back seat or in the passenger seat. I'll buckle you in, but I'm in control. Okay. Got it. And I think it's helpful to name your inner bully. So, Stacy's mine.
I have to give her a name.
Yeah. Stacy's mine. And no offense to any Stacy's out there, it's just a name that I picked. And there's a reason why, of course, but you have to do what's right for you. So I think having something to call out, recognizing that it is this inner critic, it's not you, it's your inner voice trying to protect you, but you don't need it to protect you anymore. We have to get really honest with who we're carrying around with us and put her in her place or his place.
Yeah. My bully, she was actually more than a bully. She was a bit of an abuser. It was interesting. And it was my mom's voice. Yeah. She was pretty rough. So, but yeah. And as you say that, I mean, I get the bullying that, out of balance, they become a bully, but in balance, they help protect us and keep us safe.
Yes, exactly. So we have to recognize that. And we also, we all have pieces of ourselves that we love, we're so proud of that we are a certain way. And then other parts of us were like, we probably should tame that a little bit more. Right. I mean, I'm no different than everyone else. Like I have those same parts to me. And I think it's really awesome. And it's part of our growth journey to become a better version of ourselves every day, every year, every, month. I mean, by the time I get to heaven, I want God to say, you know what, daughter, you have done exactly what I wanted you to do. And you have grown every year over year after year. And I'm so proud of you. But I got to tell you, I think the chances of that being the case are pretty slim. I think that, I have to work pretty hard every year to really come to terms with me, be a better version of myself, always give and always serve and come from that servant type leadership role. I'm a work in progress. Trust me. I think, we all are for sure. But I think it's one of those things where you just got to be honest with where we are in our stages of life. I know you asked about identity, and I want to circle back to that because we didn't really get to talk about it yet, but the identity on who you believe you are is absolutely showing up for you every day. So when we think about, I'm going to use an example that's really simple. I think for most people out there that have ever said, I want to be in better shape. I want to lose weight. I want to start working out at the gym. Well, while that all might be true for all of us, at least majority of people want to feel healthy and look good and all that kind of stuff. Unless we believe that we can be that person, it won't happen. So this is why, New Year's resolutions don't necessarily work. Here we are into the new year and already people have fallen off the wagon, so to speak. It's because they go into the new year with so much vigor, like I'm going to change. It's a fresh new year and all the things. But they haven't changed their identity. All they've done is mustered up some willpower and motivation, and that fizzles out real quick. And so they didn't work on the identity piece, which is a huge piece of the pie. I have something called the Decide Model of Change, which is the name of my program, Decide 90. And it's all about having this new identity. It's having the desire to change, exploring your why, having commitment to self, and that identity change paired with daily habits and doing it every single day. And if we don't have the ability to step into that new identity and shed the old identity and leave that behind, if we're not able and willing to do that, we're not going to get to where we want to go. We have got to have some belief in ourselves that we are that new creature, that we want to be that new creature, that we already are that new creature. We're discovering that person. So for example, somebody who wants to work on their drinking and they really want to quit. Let's say it's somebody who's like, Kari, I don't want alcohol in my life anymore. I'll say, then I want you to start claiming today you're a non-drinker. You are a non-drinker. Period. You are now, that is your identity. My identity for a long time, Lisa, I smoked for 37 years and I drank,
Wow.
right? So I'd be out on my back porch with a cigarette in one hand, a glass of wine in the other. And I was absolutely a smoker who loved wine. I didn't say I was a drinker. I was a connoisseur of wine. I knew everything about wine. I was a snob. So my identity became, I'm somebody who smokes. I was a closet smoker, but I still smoked. And I'm somebody who loves wine. And that was my identity for so long. I had to make the decision that I am no longer a smoker. I don't even say I'm an ex-smoker. I'm a non-smoker.
Yeah, that's what I say. I don't call myself an ex-smoker. It's funny that you say that because I don't either. I'm a non-smoker. I mean, it's been so long.
Yeah, same. I'm a non-smoker and I'm a non-drinker, right? And I'm so much fun.
Of course.
Of course. So the thing, we've got to be able to embody that. And even if our brain is like, okay, well, that's not true because you still like that, or like going back to the gym analogy, I'm somebody who's in shape. I'm somebody who is healthy. You have to embody that mindset so that your behaviors follow. This is why identity is so huge. This is honestly, and this is where, I ruffle feathers when I say this, but for those that are truly needing recovery and so forth, the problem that I have with traditional recovery programs is that once you're an addict, you're always an addict. Right. And I butt up against that a little bit because I believe that if the person claims over their life that they are this new creature, that they are this new person, that they can absolutely move into that identity where it's no longer a problem. They still may need to work a program. They still need to do the daily work, but it doesn't mean that they are needing to claim that identity over their life for the rest of their life. And this is where, I definitely ruffle some feathers when I speak about this, because people who are in active recovery say, well, Kari, that's how I get through. So if that works for them, then I don't want, do you, boo. Like, but for most people, it's when you get stuck in that same mindset thinking that this is who I am, I'll always be this way. There's this negativity that goes with it. If there's no negativity for the person, if they're proud to say, I'm an addict that's recovered, or I'm a recovering addict or alcoholic, if that resonates with that person and it gives them this boost of confidence and vigor in their life, then by all means, if it works for you, do it. But for most people, it's the opposite of that. They want to know that they've become a superpower. Matter of fact, one of my former clients who just celebrated 2 years of not drinking, he said, Kari, being sober is a superpower. I didn't realize. Now he doesn't say he's in recovery. He doesn't say he was an alcoholic. He is a non-drinker who has discovered a superpower from him stepping into that identity. That's the shift that I'm talking about. Talk about identity.
That makes sense. And I agree. And I see how, it could ruffle feathers because I know that that's the belief system that, you're always in recovery. You're always an addict, even if you're in recovery. But I agree because it can have a negative, how do I say, kind of cloud over you, right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And here's the thing with that mindset is that there's the acknowledgement that they can never drink or do drugs again.
Correct.
Right? So if you take on the identity that you are a non-drinker, a non-user, that you are somebody who is sober, then you've already made that shift. You made that conscious decision of a shift, and that person just doesn't do it. But you always have this support system of active recovery or being in a support group of working a program, staying in touch with who you are, that constant self-development. But claiming that identity piece, to me, I think is a huge part. We can also say this about being a victim of abuse. I'm one of those people. I don't walk around saying that I'm a victim anymore. I look at, and I'm not happy for what happened to me. I look back on some situations I experienced through my childhood up into my teen years, and it was god awful. I don't wish that on any child. But the thing of it is, I look back on that now and I don't even think of myself as Kari. I look at this little girl who went through and made choices and decisions based on what she knew at that point in her life. She did the best that she could do. Bless her
Yes.
heart, right? I look at
Absolutely.
her. Yeah, I look at the younger version of me with so much passion and compassion, and saying she did the best she can do, but that's not who I am today.
Correct. Yes. And
So I
that
have
is
to
so true.
separate. Yeah, when you separate that, because here's the thing, Lisa, you probably know this too. If we hold on to a victim mentality, we always will have the need to blame. We will have the resentment. And this is part of the healing process. This is the part of active recovery that I do like, that we are making amends. This is what I love about the 12-step program, for example. We're finding those resentments that we have for people, for organizations, for whatever, right? We find those resentments, we make a moral inventory about it, and then we make amends to that. We go into forgiveness. And it's in that forgiveness piece, which is so flipping hard for so many people because they want to hold on to it. If we hold on to the victim mentality, it keeps us in the I'm right category, as opposed to maybe there was a piece of me that played a part in this. I'm not talking about child abuse. I'm not talking about that, but there are some other areas of our life where we have actually been the cause of some of the issues and the things that we chose. And if we don't reconcile that inside of our mind, then we will always remain in a victim state mentality. And all that is going to do is keep you playing small, keeping you stuck, keeping you resentful, keeping you blaming others, when we have got to have a forgiveness mindset. That's what God asks us to do, is to forgive others. And that includes forgiving ourselves.
Yes. 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 Yep. And I can attest to the fact that I carried that for years. I was definitely in the victim mindset. And, you know, when I think back on it, when I was a child, I was a victim. And, you know, I carried that mindset into my adult life. And you're right. It did create, I didn't take ownership for stuff I did. And because I didn't take ownership, I made more of a victim mindset for myself because I looked at everything as against me. You know, I couldn't take constructive criticism because you were being mean to me. So everything was coming at me. So I kept going down that road of everybody's picking on me. Why is this happening to me? And I tell you, it is so powerless. And it is so frustrating. And, you know, I have completely walked away from the victim mindset, and it is absolutely empowering to take ownership of my stuff and to know that I am in charge of this. You know, I'm not just sitting here and everything's happening to me. I have a say in this.
That's right. That's right. And that's the beautiful part, is when we move into that, you know, you're healing, because we're not supposed to walk around with all this heaviness on us. It's like, I had a coach that I worked with once, and he did the best example for me. He took this heavy suitcase. He literally had just came back from India. He didn't even unpack a suitcase, but we were on a Zoom call and I was really struggling at that time. It was a couple of years ago, and I was struggling with something specific. And he said, Kari, I'm going to show you what this is like for you. And he said, I'll be right back. And he picked up his suitcase and he stuck it on his back, and he was hunched over, and it was heavy. You know, it was like probably a 50-pound suitcase, and he's hunched over, and he said, you keep carrying around your box of rocks. Of course, he called it something else, a couple of cuss words in there. He goes, you carried this around with you day after day after day after day after day. It has become your excuses, your box of excuses, your rocks that hold you back, that keep you burdened and heavy. He said, can I tell you when you'll break free of all that? And with that, he like threw the suitcase off of his back. He said, when you decide to throw this thing off your back. And of course, he said it in a different way. You can imagine more for us.
He was making a point.
Oh, he made a point. He made a very visual point. And I got it. In that moment, I thought, you know what? I'm electing to keep this suitcase of rocks that I'm carrying around, of my victim mentality, my victim way of doing things. This is just how it's going to be. right? Like I'm the victim. This happened to me. This is why I do what I did, I do on a regular basis, because all this, again, happened to me. And it wasn't till I wrote a blog post. It's been a hot minute. It's probably been 4 years ago now. It was called Pitiful to Powerful. And it was my story of, I didn't go too far. I went far enough where the reader got it, but I didn't go into too much detail because I knew my mother would be reading it. And I didn't want to, there was, there's some stuff there. Yeah. Right. So I thought, let me ease into this, but I told the reader about my childhood, and my school year age, time frame, which by the time I got to ninth grade, my second ninth grade, it was my 12th school.
Oof.
And I had been beaten so badly in 7th and 8th grade that I dropped out of school and halfway through 7th grade, and then was able to finish my exam to move into 8th grade. And then 8th grade, I was beaten so badly, my dad didn't recognize me. I was living with him at the time. And,
Oh my God.
and he forced me to go back to school on Monday morning. That happened on a Friday night. I was just traumatized, and then arrested
gosh.
for underage drinking. I mean, it was just a hot mess in 7th, 8th, and whatever grade. So I get to 9th grade. I got kicked out of the public school. I moved from St. Louis to Pennsylvania. I got kicked out of the first 9th grade school that I went to. It was a public school because I called the teacher his last name instead of Mr. in front of it. And he literally picked me up, threw me against the locker, slapped me upside the head in front of the entire class. And I picked up my books, told him to do, what himself. And I was told to go to the office, which the principal's office, and I was expelled from school. And the only other school left in the city at that time was a Catholic school. Well, I wasn't raised Catholic. I wasn't raised in a church at all. And I ended up going to this Catholic school. Halfway through the school year, I started right after the after the New Year of
break.
After break. Yeah, thank you. And everyone has a uniform on that's all matching. And this chick shows up with corduroys on and a white shirt because I didn't have a uniform. My mom, by the way, was a single mom working 2 jobs. And now and I'm not Catholic. So there's no church that is kicking in money to me to go to this Catholic school. So my mom had to pay for all of it. And of course, put the guilt on me because I knew my mom was struggling the way it was. Now she's got to pay all this tuition because we don't have a parish that's paying for it. And the first day of my 9th grade, the second 9th grade, I had 3 girls come up to me. And I thought, oh, here we go again. I'm waiting for it. Why? Because this has happened over and over again. I was the one who always got bullied and picked on. And they said, you must be the new girl. I'm like, duh, what gave you the idea? Because I'm the only one that has corduroys on. And they said, well, I'm so-and-so. Would you like to sit with us at lunch today?
Oh.
And I was like, what? Yeah. Do you want to sit with us at lunch? I'm like, yeah, that'd be great.
Oh.
And I realized that the school, it was a high school, but the 9th grade was separated from 10th, 11th, and 12th. And this 9th grade, it was such a small class. There was maybe 100 of us. We're so close that they just took me in with open arms. And I was like, oh my gosh, that school saved my life. So I went from this pitiful existence from 7 years of age when I had my first cigarette, by the way, up to this 9th grade that completely shifted my entire trajectory. I believe to this day that school saved my life, that those girls saved my life. And that if it wasn't for the situation of me getting kicked out of that first 9th grade, I don't think I'd be where I am today. I think I believe 100% that all of the actions that happened led me to where I am today. So I could be here to talk about all of these things. Been there, done it, experienced it. I was the victim of change, if you will. And nevertheless, I look back on all of that now and say, you know what? Yes, that little girl experienced a lot for her young age. And that little girl also had a part in it. And that little girl survived. And that little girl became a fighter. And that little girl became a beautiful woman who now has a servant heart that wants to help others. And if that's not a great story, and if that's not the way that it's supposed to be, well, then, wow, then I guess I have no reason. Right. But I don't believe that that's true. I believe that God allowed all these things to happen for me so that I could be in this position. Not that
Mhm.
I'm happy it happened, but I am
Right.
grateful.
Right. And the thing that I think you will be in agreement with is the same thing that I believe, is that the reason why I'm doing this podcast is to help shorten people's pain.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's, the thing of at least is the listener is also agreeing, like saying, oh, thank God it's not just me. It's
Mhm.
not just me. There's others out there just like me. And that's the
Mhm.
thing. When we're going through something, we think we're the only one. When I decided to quit drinking, I didn't want to tell anybody. I
Yeah.
remember the first coach I worked with, he said, Kari, I think someday you're going to be a coach. I think you're going to start your own coaching program. And I think you're going to I'm sorry. And I think you're going to share your story with the world. And I bust out laughing. I'm like, dude, are you crazy? I'm never going to tell anybody that I had an issue with drinking. And I
Yeah.
realized that the moment I opened up my mouth, that I shared with someone that, hey, I think I'm drinking too much and I want to do something about it, was the day that the chains started coming off, because I
Mhm.
realized if I'm willing to share my story with someone, it doesn't have to be the universe like it is now. It could be just one person, that opens up the door for healing.
Mhm.
And that's the true with whatever's going on in your life, with any trauma that you've dealt with. The moment you start sharing about that and telling others about it, someone that you trust, and sometimes that person isn't even someone you know, it's somebody that you don't
Mhm.
know. It's a
Yeah.
completely non-biased stranger. It sometimes is easier to tell that to than someone that is close to you. Sometimes.
And sharing also disempowers shame, which shame is what you were feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's, we have these thoughts going through our head, and you're right. When we tend to isolate ourselves, I mean, I know that's what I've done in the past. And I think I'm the only one that's dealing with this. I'm the only one that's thinking like this. And it's, obviously not true, because once, that's the thing, that was the magical thing that happened when I was helping with the childhood abuse healing workshop. Is the first night of the workshop, the women would share a story. They would share one story. And for some of them, they'd never shared. And for others, what we did too is we exposed the lies that they believed, because some of those lies would come out as they're telling their story, what their belief system is as a result
Yeah.
of that incident.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, one thing, it connected the women, because all of a sudden that little thread of shame all of a sudden is dropped, because they've shared their story, and half the room, if not the whole room, can identify with what this person's going through. They can relate to all their feelings and their emotions and their fears and all of that. And it created a connection among them. It was really magical. But sharing your story absolutely will disempower shame.
Yes. Yes. Because once it's exposed to light, it can't be any
Yes.
darkness anymore, no matter
Yes.
what it is. And
Yes.
that's, there's a freeing that happens, and it's just getting to that point. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to do. It wasn't hard for me because I'm an external processor. I'm someone who shares very openly. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I mean, I could walk into a room and immediately how I'm feeling. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just have that type of energy that it's picked up,
Yeah.
very easily. Although everybody has a certain aura of energy that they transmit, whether they want to believe it or not, even if you're
It's
not
true.
directly talking to someone, they can feel it in an email, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, for me, it's just, and maybe there's a lot of people out there too, that it's very easily seen and felt. And if that's you, then you know already that the moment you start to open up to somebody, they're going to receive that because they're going to feel your heart, and they're going
Mm-hmm.
to be able to help you through it. And you know what I found too? The more often I share, like every time I do a podcast, right, which is like 100 episodes, every time I share, every time I do a post, whatever, it helps someone else, which helps me. It's this constant giving back.
True.
Just like you doing this podcast, Lisa, and having the listeners hear your voice and hear the guest voice and hear their stories. It helps them go, you know what? I could probably do this too.
Mm-hmm.
If they can do it, I can do it. And that's all we're here for. No one's better than anybody else. We just might have a different path that we're 2 steps ahead of you, but not that far. Right.
Right. Right. And we're sharing how we all kind of got through this, and, and, and how we've, healed, because we're trying to help those out,
Mhm.
that, like I think about where I was at, and I was searching and searching and searching, and there wasn't stuff out there, so my my growth for many years was really slow and probably stunted for quite some time. The majority of my growth has happened over like the last 10 13 years or so, but there wasn't anything out there. And so that's what's so refreshing here, is bringing these experts like you on that share this, that people can relate to and know that there's hope. Because it's real easy. Because the one theme thing that I really love that you've really shared during the podcast is paying attention to the thoughts, and paying attention to, are they negative or are they positive? Because that, and I didn't even realize that I do that, but I didn't realize I consciously do that. But it is key, because that is that should be your guide.
Well, I'm going to give you another nuanced way of thinking of that, versus negative, not negative versus positive, but rather protective versus expansive. So if we think of thoughts, right? Because all thoughts are great. Like we're human, we're meant to have thoughts.
Right.
We have 6 core emotions. We have tons of thoughts or feelings. I'm sorry, feelings that come off of that. But when we have thoughts that are causing us to feel bad,
that's what I meant to say. That's a better way of saying
that's
it.
Okay. Then if they are moving you into a not feel good, they're feeling bad to you, then we know that those emotions that we're feeling are protective emotions. And then we also know that the thought can't be true, because if it's causing you to feel bad, then the thought isn't true. And I know that's blowing people's mind right now. Like,
I love it.
But if you really look at this and distill it, and there's somebody that I would share with you to start listening to, because this concept, well, it's been around for a while. It started with the book of The Power of Decision by Raymond Barker Charles. Raymond Barker Charles. The Power of Decision is a book that was written years ago, I think like 25, 30 years ago now. But there's a gentleman by the name of David Baer, and his work is very much on that book. And I love his philosophies, the way that he's taken the book and not really added his own, but just really massaged this into being so simplified that when we think of something that is causing us to feel bad, we always know that feeling is not, or that thought is not true. There's always got to be something else that is true. And if we can shift our mindset into that thinking, then we can start being in a better place, because we're catching it. And the part of the change that happens within us is we have to be willing to see that awareness. If we have the awareness on it, every time we have that click of awareness, we are then rewiring our brain in that moment.
Yes.
We're saying, oh, we're catching the thought. There it is again. There's a familiar pattern. I'm saying no to that. I'm saying, Stacy, get in the passenger seat, girl, because you're not taking over anymore. I see a new way of doing things. And every time we challenge ourselves with that, every time we catch ourselves in that, we bring awareness to it, the less hold it has on us. And we're able to change that thinking pattern that will better suit us every time. That
was beautifully, beautifully said.
Listen, it took a long time for you to get to this place with your thoughts the way that they were. It's going to take a hot minute for you to start moving things around and rewiring the way your brain, really wants to operate, which is to help you and not have these battlefields inside your head.
Yeah. And be easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace, right? Because we can tend to be hard on ourselves when it comes to these thoughts, but yeah,
they can be crippling. And I know, I've been in those dark places where our thoughts can cripple us to the point where we start thinking crazy, right?
Yes.
Thoughts like, I shouldn't even be alive. Like, there's no point in my life, right? When we start getting into that place, we've moved so far outside of what we call the polyvagal theory, which is like this regulational state that we ebb and flow throughout the day. If we get too far below that state, we get into that really deep, depressive, oh my gosh, my life is, over and I can't stop these thoughts. We get really, really in that place. You need to know how to climb out of that. And it's hard. Exercise, moving your body, changing your state quickly, putting on music, dancing, calling a friend. Like, there are self-regulation tools that you can be using and adopting to help you switch quickly out of those modes. But if you don't know them and you get in that cycle and you stay there and you spin, it can be devastating for a lot of
Mhm.
people. And this is why we reach for alcohol or drugs or porn or overeat or scroll through our phone or, whatever that is self-sabotaging to us. This is why we don't want to feel the feelings.
Mhm.
We want it
Yeah.
to stop.
One of the things that I've done, and I've shared this story, and I won't get into it too much, but I've shared the story before of just even for me, what I've learned to do is when, especially if there's something, even fearful that's happening in my life, my mind, of course, can go to the very end and go to the very scary part, which is what happened last year. And I hadn't lived in that lifestyle in a while because I had learned to regulate myself, but this was pretty big and it was consuming me and it was taking me to a really dark place. And I had to literally stop. And what I did for me is instead of going down that scary road and thinking the worst things that could happen and taking it all the way to the end, I decided I'm going to think about how I want it to look, how I want it to be. Right.
Yes. Love it.
Okay. This was crazy because it worked. And so it was a story about my husband. He had a really serious health issue last year and it was really scary. And I wasn't managing it well at home. I had to be at home. He was in the hospital and it was really scary. And I was spinning. And so the first thing I did when I realized how bad I was spinning and I couldn't stand the way I was feeling and the emotions that were inside of me. And, I needed to express some of the emotions. And then I went and meditated. And then I literally out of the meditation, I went, I'm going to spend time right now focusing on what I want this to look like. And it came out exactly the way. Now, I'm not saying that happens every time, but it did. First of all, it got me calm and got me centered and got me focused because it was bad. And it ended up coming out just fine. Thank you, God, with lots of prayer. But it was saved me because I can't even, I have a hard time even articulating just how consuming it was.
I know, I've been there. And I will tell you the reason why it works is because we shift ourselves into gratitude.
Oh, yes.
When you start visualizing and you start seeing things the way that you want it, you immediately have gratitude for the situation. And when we move into gratitude, we immediately shift out of that protective state into an expansive state. And it's only in that
Totally.
expansive state can we see and feel what we want. And when that happens, we have the vibrational energy that we're emitting, and God, universe, source, whatever you want to believe. For me, it's God. God is already on your side. So now you've opened up the channels for that to happen. You've opened up the energy ways. You open up the path for the angels to come in and help you and guide you to that goal, because now we have the ability to do that. But unless we're in gratitude, unless we can find the gift in those dark places, we're going to remain stuck, because it's like once we're confused and we're disoriented, it's really hard to find the light. But if the moment you shift into like, what is working, this isn't working, it's not working, nothing's working, blah, 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 blah. The moment you say, well, but what is working? Where are the gains here? As soon as you shift into that type of mindset, boom. Now you're on the way. Now you have the ability to start shifting into gratitude, which shifts you out of that state. And the other way to do that, I love that you meditated. I love that you prayed. I love that you saw the vision, is to really feel it as if it's already done.
Yes. Yes, you absolutely. You are so right. You are describing it so beautifully. And that is so true. That is exactly it. You have to feel it. It became a part of me. It is the only thing that I would focus on. And I 100% believed it. It was interesting because, like I said, I came out of the meditation and then I thought, okay, I'm not going back there. How do I want this to look? I immediately went to, how do I want this to look? How do I want this to come out?
Yes.
And I had a great night's sleep that night.
There's an awesome book, and I'm going to forget the author's name at the top of my head, but the book is called It Is Done. And it's written by a guy. He does a lot of manifestation books. And what really drew me to this book is because somewhere in the foreword it said, when you say it is done, it's very similar to saying amen after a prayer. When we say amen after a prayer, we're saying we're giving thanks and we're saying, we believe you. We have faith, God, that you're going to answer our prayers. Amen. It's done. Amen. It's an agreement. So when we say, even when we say it out loud, like in your case about your husband, you visualized it, and without even saying it, you were like, it is done. Like you're seeing the outcome. So when we physically say it is done after a visualization process or after something that we ask for, we are claiming that as ours. And it gives us the opportunity for things then to come to us, and it clears the way forward for us. And it sounds crazy for those, like manifestation and the law of attraction and, all the things that can be considered new age mysticism, while some of it very well is,
Right.
there's also a piece of it, which is the law of what is written. And when I talk about what is written, I'm talking about the Bible, everything dated to the ancient scrolls. When we believe, when we have faith, having faith is believing that it already is done. And when we have faith, what we're saying is we're in agreement with what God has already provided for us. Now, we don't always get what we want in life, right? We don't always get the material things or things to work out exactly the way that we want them. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. But if it's meant for you,
correct.
then
That's
it'll
the
happen.
key.
Yeah. And, I always like to say too, if I ask for something like, God, I really would love to see this happen, and I'm thanking you now that it's already happened, this or better. Because sometimes God wants to give us more in abundance. And if we just say we want this, then that's what we get. But if we say this or better or more or whatever the situation is, oftentimes we get surprised when it actually happens.
Right. Or we get, and with me, when I'm making a decision, a big decision, I've learned to just kind of hold it loosely too, God, if this is meant for me to have this, you're going to provide it. And if not, you've got something better.
Yes, exactly. We have to believe that that's true.
And I know that to be true. I'll give you an example. In buying our home, it was during a crazy time of the market, and, we put offers in on other ones, and it was like, it was so funny because the next day I had anxiety. And it's like, okay, God, but we put the offer in, it's like, okay, Lord, if this is what we're meant to have, then open up the door. And if not, and none of those came through. And the one that came through is the one that, we wanted. And it turned out perfect. But what I'm saying is, it wasn't like we put the offer in and I went, oh, I have to have this house. I know better. And I know that if it's meant to be, it's mine.
Yeah, exactly. It's already done. It is done.
It is done. I love that. It is done. I love
Check that book out. I'm forgetting the author's name, but it was just so good and very, very helpful. And The Power of Decision is, like I mentioned earlier, that's a really great book. It's not an easy read. I actually started reading that 3 times and I had to put it down. And then finally one day I was like, I'm taking this book with me I had to go cross country on a, plane ride. And I was like, I'm going to take that book with me. And my goal is to finish that book on the plane. And I read it from front to cover, there and back. And it was like so easy. I don't know why. I don't know why you get more work done on an airplane. I just don't get it. Like
I know.
I've prepared like workshops on an airplane before. So I don't know. I do well on a plane. Maybe I should go on plane rides more often.
So tell us about the program that you have coming up.
Yeah. So Decide 90 is a 90-day program where we're diving deep. We're not just talking about drinking, our relationship with alcohol. We're talking about everything that is holding us back, because, what I found was the past several years, I had a 30-day program, which was great. People can do anything for 30 days. And while a 30-day program is a great way, those challenge type, like mindset, like, oh, I can do that for 30 days. Every person after the 30 days was like, okay, Kari, well, now what? Like, how am I going to go the next 30 days? So that's why Decide 90 exists. It's really it's the Decide model of change. I'm breaking it down over, a 12-week period, and we are going deep. And there's so many layers to this program that I'm so excited about. And, I think it's for the right person. So it's somebody who is in a leadership position or a business owner specifically, because we're going to talk a little bit also about business and some leadership skills and so forth, but it is really for that person who they want to level up. They want to get to that place where they are operating at an optimal level, that they're not going to let anything hold them back. They're done with the excuses. They're done getting out, in their way. They're tired of the facade. They're tired of not living an authentic life. Most of my clients are business owners, and they are not living authentically to who they really truly want to be. They've scored all the things that they could want: the business, the house, the cars, the wife, the husband, whatever, but they're not able to really tap into what fulfills them. And so that's why they're turning to things that are self-sabotaging. And the person who wants to really dive in and level up and get some one-on-one time as well as group time and go through a program that is very well organized and proven. I've done this program before in different various ways, but never in this 90-day program. So very excited for Decide 90.
That's exciting. So how else can the listeners get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way is my website, GrayTonic.com. Or I'm the only Kari Schwear, believe it or not, on social. So it makes it super easy to find me. Like you can't miss me. I'm the only one. So LinkedIn, Instagram is Gray_tonic. Some of it's under GrayTonic, but most of it, if you just Google Kari Schwear, you'll find me.
And we'll have all the links as well too. Yeah. So everybody will have the links for everyone to be able to reach out to you. Well, this has been great. And thank you so much. And it, you have a really great message that does need to get out there more, because honestly, until I met you, I never heard of that. And I think I think you're right. It is an area that really needs to be spoken about, because it is a big area. Mm-hmm. It's huge.
It is huge. And it's, the more that it's being spoken about, the more people are stepping up, and it is starting to really change. And I'll end with this. Lisa, the tide is turning. More and more people are becoming apt to wanting to reduce their alcohol consumption. Maybe they're mindfully drinking and they're not necessarily completely alcohol free, and that's okay too. But again, if I've planted a seed today, I'm so grateful that I have, because I want that seed just to cultivate. It may take 2 years before it starts to bloom, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But just know that if you are asking those internal questions, it is time for you to really listen, drop in, listen to what it's saying, do something about it, do it while you can and while it's still a choice, because being in a gray area is a choice. Ooh. You don't have to be there.
Mm-hmm. You are right. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you again. This has been really enlightening and great. And you've done a great job explaining so many things. I'm sitting here just listening to you, and I'm getting sucked into my own podcast.
Well, that's a good thing. I'm glad.
That's a great thing.
That's a good thing. Well, I hope the listener and that's you that needed to hear this today, then we've done our job, and I'm praying for you, and hang in there, because it's only going to be better if you decide you want it to be.
Yeah. One step at a time. Truly.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.